like to say that. So, those involved in children's church can work their way to the back. Meanwhile, the rest of y'all can turn to the book of Esther chapter 3 and a couple of little details here and announcements real quick before we start. Like one, we have a business meeting today. Yay! Yeah, I know, real sexy topic. Nonetheless, we have all the sheets in the back foyer area there that has like our budget and the personnel and the committee teams and the committee leaders that'll be voted on. And so if you're not able to stay for the business meeting, feel free to grab a sheet so you can be at least informed on what's all going on. Please stay for the meeting. It's right after the service before Sunday school. The meetings usually don't take longer than 15 minutes, so they're not that long. So it won't be real painful. Also, hopefully you received a little paddle or pamphlet thingy-mabobber that has red on one side and white on the other. Here's how this is going to work. So a little preview of if you did not get one, would you raise your hand if you want one? If you did not get a paddle, hey Katrina, would you mind grabbing and bring it up here to someone and we'll make sure everybody gets one. So here's how this works. Today is going to be a choose your own sermon adventure day. And so how this happens is I'm going to get things started, and then I'm going to get to a point. There's going to be two questions. There's going to be a question that's in white and a question that's in red. So I'm going to turn it to you guys, and you get to hold up your little paper pamphlet thingy to say, I want the white question or I want the red question. I'm then going to real quickly survey and get an idea of what the majority is, and then we're going to go with that question. And so I've instructed the PowerPoint operator there to be able to go to the proper slide, and I might have to do this a couple times to get to the right page, but we're going to get to that question and then continue the sermon from there. And then it will break again with two questions, and on it goes. Doesn't that sound like an adventure? Yeah. I thought so you notice your fill in the blank sheet is blank, because I don't know what the sermon's about today. There are 6 different sermons that could happen today. Okay, that's what it looks like. In fact, it's kind of like this. Here's a little bit of flow chart. This is literally what this looks like. Okay, and we were doing these like riddle principles along the way, answering life's riddles and things like that. And so there's 3 possible riddle answers that will affect the rest of our series. So this little film, this little choose your own adventure, it's not like Marvel. These really make a difference, okay? You really get to impact the future of the series from here on out. So anything that you don't like that's said afterwards, it's your fault, because you picked it. Okay, that's kind of what's going on. So this is going to be exciting. I've only done a sermon like this once in my life, and it went really weird, and so I'm really curious to see how it goes like this. I'm real pumped about this. So are you guys ready? Oh, good. I'm going to do a brief prayer because I need it. And then we're going to dig into this. So let's pray. Heavenly Father, how amazing it is that we can spend time studying your word. I ask that you help us not to waste this time, but to embrace every moment and capture it so that we can be convicted by your Spirit, that we might be matured by your word and made sharper for your kingdom, for your honor, and for your glory. And this I seek in your Son's name, Jesus Christ. Amen. Okay, so let's do this as a way of just starting things off, just to give you practice. Okay, this one won't make a hill of beans difference on anything, but just to give you practice so you're not caught off guard later, here's going to be the first set here. So the white question is, we could take about a minute and go through the recap of the first 5 survival tips or riddle answering tips thus far, or we could go the red route, which is, I will tell you, a teaching moment I had with my daughter not that long ago. And so you simply raise up a white or red paddle, whether you want the recap or you want, it's like 99.9% red. So, okay, red it is. So, the teaching moment with Ziva. I was at a baseball game, and Ziva was watching it. George was bored with it, so he went over to his grandma's house, and I'm with Ziva, and she's on a playground, and she's playing on the playground, and I noticed that the floor on the upper level was doing this. It was moving. And I went up close to it and I saw that it had rusted through and was actually broken and the whole thing was getting ready to fall off. And so I said, hey, Ziva, come on down. So she came down. She goes, what, Daddy? And I said, look, see how it's rusted? She goes, yeah. I said, see, that's dangerous. You could actually end up getting hurt on that. I'd recommend playing on the other equipment, not this one. So then people screamed in the baseball, and I turned, I looked, and everyone's screaming. Some kid got a good hit, and someone scored a run. It was like now 90-80. It was just insane. And so then I turned back, and there's Ziva talking to a whole bunch of kids, and the kids are on that play equipment that I told her to stay away from. And they're all up there playing on it, and she's talking to them, and she's saying something to them, and she's gesturing at them a little bit, and then some will come down talking to her, and she's pointing to things, and then they go and they keep playing, and then if the game was over, I load her up in the car and we started driving home. And Ziva's all in thought. She's just meditative, sitting there staring out the window. And I'm driving, I see her in the rearview mirror, and I go, Ziva, what's up? What's up? And she said, well, Daddy, other kids were playing on that equipment, and I told them that it was dangerous, but they weren't listening to me. But I kept warning them and telling them that it's not safe, but they still played on it. And I don't understand why that happened. And I said, Ziva, here's just something you need to learn. That in life, you can tell people the truth, and sometimes they just either don't want to hear it or they don't care to hear it. And so sometimes you just got to stand up for what's right anyways, whether they want to hear it or not. Isn't that a great teaching moment? I know you're expecting to be a great funny joke. But no, it's a great moment to show that we can capture teaching moments throughout our lives. Okay? So we can teach people for good or for evil. Okay, now this is where we come in with our series in Esther. Because Mordecai is someone who made choices. And it gave teaching moments to his adopted daughter, his cousin, okay, he adopted her as a daughter. And he tried teaching her, and he taught her poorly. He didn't teach her well. He taught her to hide her faith. He taught her to hide her ethnicity. He taught her, don't observe the Sabbath. Don't follow the dietary laws. Don't do any of those things that Jews are supposed to do. Instead, don't let anybody even find out or even be able to observe that you could be Jewish. Just hide all of that. Okay, so now here we are in chapter 3, and it's not because, some people might think, well, yeah, because people don't like the Jews there. Actually, Persia was very pro-Jew. They were as pro-Jew as like America is. You know, we're fairly a pro-Jew nation. Yes, there's individuals that aren't, but as a nation, we're pro-Jew, especially under our current president. He's really been pro-Jew, and it's been kind of exciting to watch that. And so it's interesting that Persia was pro-Jew. Persia even said, Jews, go rebuild your temple. It's going to cost you $3 trillion. Fine, here's a check for $3 trillion. Go build the temple. Our treasury open for you. You can't get more pro-Jew than that. Okay, I mean, they were like totally. They're like, hey, form a movie company and call it Hollywood. You know, they were just kind of like, we'll pay for it. You know, that's kind of what Persia did. All right, they put a whole bunch on the line there. So they're pro-Jew. They're not anti-Jew. They're pro-freedom of religion. So when Mordecai said, Esther, hide your ethnicity, hide that you're Jewish, hide that religion, it's not because he feared anti-Semitism. It's not because he feared racism. It's not because he feared prejudice. It's because he wanted Esther to be queen. Because when the Bachelor of Persia happened, the kings of Persia, 99.9% of the time, married Persians. And it's hard to tell a Persian from a Jewish person from their skin. They look very similar. So he's like, don't let anybody know. Because they usually marry Persians. And if you want to win, be Persian. You know, that's kind of his advice. He's like, go, be hot. Go, be sexy. You know, he's like, go, do it well. Rock that bed. You know, that's what Mordecai was basically saying to her. Okay, and I know it's totally opposite everything we've ever taught about Esther, because our Sunday school literature for kids doesn't talk about the strong sexual overtones that's in this story, and it shouldn't teach that to kids. I just think Esther shouldn't be taught to kids at all. That's just kind of where I'm at. I don't like it when kids are taught stories wrong. I want them to be taught it right. And if it's not appropriate for them to be taught it, then skip that story for now. Wait until they turn, you know, like with my daughter at 25 to learn about this story. That's just what I think. So that's kind of the situation. Now, you might be saying, wait a minute, Pastor John, you said there's no anti-Semitism. You say there's no prejudice like that in the country. What about Haman? What about that dude? Because I saw VeggieTales, and it said that he hated the Jews. It said that Mordecai told Esther to let them know you're Jews because Haman hates our family. It said that in VeggieTales. Therefore, it's gospel truth. Well, it doesn't say it in the Bible. VeggieTales brought that interpretation into it. Okay, now, Haman does ask for the genocide of Jews. That is true. Haman does go that route. Okay, so there is badness, and Haman's a bad guy. He is a villain in this story. He is historically a bad guy. However, I'm just willing to state, and I'm going to put everything on this, that Mordecai kind of picked the fight. That Haman would not have sought after the Jews if Mordecai hadn't picked the fight. And so I'm going to put this on Mordecai's shoulders. And I know some of you are like, oh, brother, no way. You do not have the same Bible I have. Just you wait and see. We'll find out how it goes depending upon what questions you guys pick. So that's your lead in. So here we go. I want to run through these 11 verses so that we're all on the same page, then question time. So here we go. Verses 1 through 11 of chapter 3. So after these events, what events? That Mordecai saved the life of the king. Mordecai found out about the assassination plot, told Esther. Esther told the king. The king found out about the assassination plot and had the guys killed. Okay, it was a great moment of impaling. It was just brilliant. Told him to stick around so he could kill him. It was great. So after these events, King Xerxes honored Haman, which is weird, because who should be honored? Mordecai should be honored. He saved the life of the king. So Mordecai should be honored. So here it is, Mordecai saves the king, and Haman, son of Hammedatha the Agagite, gets honored. And the king elevated him and gave him the seat of honor higher than that of all the other nobles. So he's kind of like VP, okay? The entire royal staff at the king's gate bowed down and paid homage to Haman because the king had commanded this to be done for him. But Mordecai would not bow down or pay homage. The member of the royal staff at the king's gate asked Mordecai, "Why are you disobeying the king's commands?" And when they had warned him day after day, he still would not listen to them, and they told Haman to see if Mordecai's actions would be tolerated since he had told them he was a Jew. So Mordecai says, I can't, I'm a Jew. Okay, when Haman saw that Mordecai was not bowing down or paying him homage, Haman was filled with rage. And when he learned of Mordecai's ethnic identity, Haman decided not to do away with Mordecai alone. He planned to destroy all of Mordecai's people. It seems like a big jump, doesn't it? Okay, so decided to kill all of Mordecai's people, the Jews, throughout Ahasuerus' or King Xerxes' kingdom. In the first month, the month of Nisan, or Nisan, it depends on which car you're driving. In King Ahasuerus' 12th year, that is, the lot was cast before Haman for each day in the month. And it fell on the 12th month, the month Adar. Then Haman informed King Ahasuerus, "There is one ethnic group scattered throughout the peoples in every province of your kingdom." Yes, I think he sounded like that. Your kingdom, yet living in isolation. Their laws are different from everyone else's, and they do not obey the king's laws. It is not in the king's best interest to tolerate them. If the king approves, let an order be drawn up authorizing their destruction, and I will pay 375 tons of silver to the accountants for deposit in the royal treasury. This guy had money. Okay, just letting you know, this guy had money. Okay, it's amazing how powerful money can be. The king removed his signet ring from his finger and gave it to Haman, son of Hammedatha the Agagite, the enemy of the Jewish people. Then the king told Haman, the money and people are given to you to do with as you see fit. There. Now we've gotten through the first 11 verses. Question number 1. Technically 2 if you count the opening one. Okay, so question number 1. Shall we learn more about the heinous handout of Haman the Horrible? Or should we go a different route and look at the who's and how's of bow vows? So the white question is going to look at the law that Haman wanted to draw up, and the second one is going to focus on Mordecai not bowing. So which way should we go? So go ahead and place your vote of red and white, red and white. Let's see here. And looks like it is predominantly white. So we're going to go with the white one here then. So the heinous handout of Haman the horrible. So the heinous handout of Haman the horrible. There we go. Yeehaw. There's Haman. See, he's horrible. So the heinous handout of Haman the horrible. So with this, what is going on here is it's very, very interesting that Haman is this guy that is, in a sense, you could say, appearing to be prejudiced against the Jewish people. Okay, it's very interesting that he is very much prejudiced against the Jewish people. Okay, so he writes up this prejudiced letter. Now, one quick note about Haman. He comes from a background of people that hated the Jews for like centuries, because he is called an Agagite. And Agag was the leader of the Amalekites. Now, this is going to be a little bit of history for you, but you need this for context. The Amalekites were under the judgment of God. King Saul was told to kill every Amalekite alive, women and children included. It was something called the harem. And the harem was a full judgment of God upon a group of people, and Israel was God's instrument of judgment. Okay, so God basically has said, I've drawn a line in the sand. There is salvation up to this point. Beyond that point, you are just done with as a nation. The Amalekites passed that point. And so God told Saul, take Israel's army, wipe out the Amalekites 100%. All women, children, take no spoils, no plunder, destroy the nation. They are under judgment. My curse is upon them. You are my sword. Wipe them out. So King Saul came across Agag, the leader of the Amalekites, and spared his life. He did not kill Agag like he was supposed to. And so God got so mad at Saul, God said, Saul, you stupid person. You bad king. I remove you as king. I even regret ever making you king. I remove you as king, and David is going to be king instead of you. Okay, so Agag lived, and Agag had many kids who became the Agagites. Do you think the Agagites liked the Jews? No, they didn't. So Haman is an Agagite. Now, he's living in a land and ruled under a king that is very pro-Jew. So Haman's one of those guys that's kind of, he deep down inside doesn't like them, but there's not like there's much he can really do. Right? And so when this moment happens, that Mordecai is not bowing to Haman, what happens here then is Haman takes that inner anger that's been brought up from his childhood, taught by his pappy, his grandpappy, and his pappy, grandpappy. I don't know what they call them, but he got it taught throughout the generations. Okay, so he just is like, what do you mean? He's a Jew? Well then, I'll tell you what, this is an opportunity. I will uphold the family justice. I will say, let's wipe them all out and let's do genocide. So he gives this letter to the king. He gives this argument to the king. That's a very interesting little argument. Okay, and so he starts off like this. And here's his pattern, by the way, that he does this. He deals with a pattern that starts with the thoughts of fear. So he's trying to create thoughts of fear into the king. And then that fear is to bring out the emotion of anger. Anger is always a secondary emotion. It's not a primary emotion. Anger comes from fear. Okay, so there's fear first, then anger. So anyone that's mad has fear first. It might be a split second, but it is there. So there's fear that brings about from that the emotion, secondary emotion of anger. From that comes the attitude of hate, and then from hate comes the evil actions. This is taught very well, by the way, in Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. Yoda sits there and goes, fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to suffering. That was like Star Wars. You're going to want to, I'll do it. I'm closer. I know what it is. It'll just be a second. We'll all count to 3 together. 1, 2, 3. Okay, there. Now everything should be going good. Is it? Yep, there it is. So there, we're all good. So back to Yoda, unless it hates Yoda. Okay, so fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, hate leads to suffering. Okay, and so that's the line from Star Wars 1. So here's what goes on. So Haman starts off here with that by saying there's a certain people. Notice he does not tell Xerxes who the people are. He does not tell them they're Jews because King Xerxes is what? Pro-Jew. So he doesn't tell them they're Jewish people. He keeps that hidden. He says there's a certain people. Okay, there's a certain people. And here's what he's doing. He's creating fear by dehumanizing them, by saying there's these people. And this is how he talks. There's these people. In other words, they're over there somewhere, but they're in our hair. Okay, that's kind of how that is talked, being brought about to them. And it's very similar to how people talk today when they don't like a group of people. And they'll say, well, those or those youth or kids these days just don't get life. Okay, or those youth or those people. And they'll start talking about them in that, like those in California. And they just want to separate them from the rest of the norm. Okay, and so they talk about them in distant techniques. So they always say those people. Not to us with the problem, it's those people who are the problem. Okay, so that's how prejudice starts like this. That's how it begins. So it's those people. There's a certain people that are out there. Okay, and so then he says they're dispersed among your kingdom. That's his second little point here. They're dispersed among your kingdom. In other words, they are infiltrating, they're polluting, they're plaguing, they're like a cancer. Okay, they're dispersed throughout the land, and they're a problem that's not limited in just one area. Okay, and people talk like that this way all the time. Can I get a taxi driver who speaks English? You know, can I talk to someone on technical support that has not a big Indian accent? And they talk about how, you know, minorities, pretty soon white will be the minority in America. This is a problem. And you hear people talk like that. Okay, that people are coming in, they're taking all our jobs. We can't let the immigrants in because they're going to take our jobs. And they talk in those types of terms. Okay, so those types of terms are fear-ridden with the goal of producing anger. That's the goal. Okay, so that's kind of what Haman's doing. He's doing a technique that's been done for centuries and millennia, and is still happening even today. It's still the same technique that is done. Okay, and so he says there's a certain people, and they're everywhere. They're everywhere. They're like an infection. And they're all over the place. You can't even go without bumping into someone. Okay, so that's Haman's thing. He's like, this is urgent. He's trying to let the king know there's urgency here. And then he tells them a warning. He says, their laws are different than our laws. In other words, they're going to create anarchy. They're going to create problems. You know, and so he's using phrases that I hear Christians use all the time. You know, they sprinkle instead of dunk. You know, and they got a tattoo. You know, and they like, you just gotta watch out. You should see how they do I saw this one youth. He had to pull up his pants just to take a step because he couldn't quite lift his leg high enough. You know, and then they talk about how they just don't dress like you're supposed to, and they don't behave supposed to. And so he's getting off on this whole thing of urgency. Okay, so not only is there fear, not only is there anger that is all coming out and there's this urgency, but now there's this even deeper anger of their laws they just don't get the laws. They just don't get it. They raise their hands while singing. We can't have their kind here. Absolutely not. We're decaf church. That's who we are. We can't have that caffeinated worship. Come on. Who are you waving to? We don't take questions. You know, it's just, this is how they talk. And they just get all, and you know what I'm talking about, because some of you get uncomfortable if somebody does something different in a worship service. And you go, why are they even here? They should go up the street. What is going on? We get all nervous. I'll never forget my first experience of that uncomfortableness when I was pastoring a church up in Michigan. And I was up there and I'm preaching and I'm going, I'm having a good time. I had props, I had stuff. I broke something, it was okay. Almost broke the speaker. But we were just going good. And all of a sudden, in the front row, there was this little lady sitting there. And she just kind of raised her hand at me. Like she wants to ask a question during the sermon. And I was kind of like, what do I do? So I'm still preaching, trying to pretend like I'm not paying attention, that she's over there with her hand raised, but I got good peripheral vision. I see this hand up. Everyone else is looking at her like, what are you doing? Put your hand down. You can see it on their faces. And I'm like, do I take a question? Would that be all right? Or is it going to be like a question not related to the sermon? Because I've had that before. Anyone who's been a teacher in a school classroom knows what that's like. Someone raised, the teacher's like, yeah, amen, brother. Know that sometimes you just can't take random questions, because then it's like, well, that's a good question for like another day. And now I'm like, I get my mantra going, my mojo going, and I get this into the zone. And if I break that zone, sometimes it's hard to get back into it, or I might lose my place. So I was all concerned. I was feeling uneasy inside. I was kind of like, and it was so frustrating. And so I decided at that moment I said, you know what, here's what we're going to do. I know this material is dense and I know it's complicated. So after the sermon's done and we're dismissed, I'll be more than happy to hang out for a few minutes and take any questions anybody may have. And come to find out, all she wanted to do was share a story that was about nothing to anything from here, where to Adam. And she just wanted to tell a story about her neighbor who had a dog that bit someone. And so I was really glad I didn't bring it in, because it would have been like, okay, because she talked to me for like 11 minutes. It would have been like, okay, sermon's over. There it was. It's about a dog that bit a kid. Amen, let's go home. So I felt justified, but man, it was awkward. It was really awkward. Our audio guy's like, I got a question. What happened to the kid? And so it's but it's awkward. And I'm looking at it, I'm just kind of like, we're not that type of church that we have that type of interaction like that, And so it was that was one of my experiences of that. And so it can be really weird, but that's kind of what Haman's doing, but on a more grand, serious level. Okay, this is where you walk into a store and you suddenly see some people get into a fight and they're pushing because of something stupid, and someone's like, well, you're just saying that because I'm black. And no, I'm not saying that. And they start really getting into it, and you're just kind of like, what's going on? Oh my goodness. And then you start getting really uneasy, really uncomfortable, and wish they just weren't in the store at all, or wish you weren't in the store, and wish that those people would just take it outside. And it was real easy to dehumanize it, to forget that this is a serious problem with people that have real anger, real hurt, real issues, and that there's got to be a better way than just simply shoving it off to the side. Okay, and so there's it's a real problem. So that's where Haman's at. He sees these people and he's trying to get the king on his side. And so he's like, so king, there's these people, they're all over the place, they're just not here and there, they're everywhere, and they just don't act like we act. They don't appreciate what we appreciate. They don't follow the laws like we want them followed. They don't do things the way we do things. Okay, they put piercings in their eyebrow. Who do they think they are, Hiawatha? I mean, come on, who puts a safety pin in their eyebrow? I mean, is it going to fall off? I mean, what's going on with that? And so they just kind of go off. That's kind of what Haman's doing here. Okay, and so he continues on, and they do not obey the king's laws. Okay, so this is where he's like, not only do they have practices, behaviors, mannerisms that are different, they just don't even obey the laws anyway. I had this experience this morning. I had it just this morning. I woke up at like 4:45 this morning and realized I forgot to make your paddles. Okay, and I was like, oh no, I forgot. I just totally forgot. My weekend got away from me, and I just forgot. So I get in my car at like 5:30 this morning, and I'm driving out to Walmart. Okay, and I get to Walmart to find out that it's closed. I've never heard of a Walmart closed in my life. Okay, it's just, especially a super center. I was like, what? Some of you are like, what? Like, yeah, the one in Beach Grove. That's one I always go to. Okay, and it was closed. They apparently, Monday through Sunday, every day of the week, they close at midnight and reopen at 6 a.m. Who knew? You know, I'm sitting there. I walked into the door. Physically, literally. I'm like, it's a slow opening door. Nope, that's not opening. I'm sitting there trying to open it, and it's not open. I'm like, what's going on here? You know, I'm like looking around. I pull out my phone, Google, Walmart Beach Grove. It says opening soon in a half hour. And I'm like, well, dang. You know, so then I go to Meijer. I'm going over to Meijer. On my way to Meijer, I'm thinking to myself, what's wrong with this crazy town? What is up with this Indiana people? Okay, so right there you're noticing I'm separating myself from everybody else, which I shouldn't do. Because, you know, I live here, I'm part of here, you know, I may not be native, but it's us. Okay, we're all together in this. But I was like, these Indiana people don't know anything. I remember going to a store a couple weeks ago, and the store literally said, if our open sign's on, we're open. If it's not on, we're closed. They had no hours. I was like, what the heck? What's up with this town, man? Come on. And there's like no urgent care center that's 24 hours anywhere except over by the airport, and they don't take my insurance. So what's up with this place? You know, so I just was thinking to myself, this is crazy. And I come over to a four-way stop, and I kid you not, nobody stopped for it. Nobody stopped. A car in front of me, just another car, a car, another car, and I'm pulling up, stopping to a car behind me. I'm like, come on. It's a four-way stop. Yeah, stop. I don't care if the cops are sleeping. I'm stopping for a four-way stop. What's wrong with these people? They got their own way of doing things. They can't keep normal store hours. There's no 24-hour Walmart, and they don't even obey the laws of the land. Someone's got to lock these people up. And I'm sitting there going, man, am I a Haman or what? I'm telling you. It was just really bizarre to me. But see, so I've had experiences like this. And I know some of you have had this. And I know because I hear you guys talk to me. And you're like, Pastor John, why do you go to the Beach Grove Walmart? That's a bad place to go. We don't want a pastor search committee because you died. What are you talking about? Like I was in the parking lot and I felt like calling 911 just watching people walk through the parking lot. And I'm like, oh, grow a backbone. Come on, it's just people. You know, but see, we have that fear, prejudice that's there. Okay, that's what we have. All right, and so here's Haman, and he's like, this is the issue, king. They don't even obey your laws, king. They need to be completely dealt with. And so he says it is not okay to let them remain. It is not okay, king. King, it is in your best interest to remove these people. It's in your best interest, O king, to get them away. James talks about this in chapter 2. Verses 2 through 5, where he points out how easy it is for a church to get to the point that when two people walk in the door, one's in shabby clothes and hasn't taken a bath in a while, and one's in a suit, for the church to usher the guy in the suit to the better position in the church building, and for the guy in the shabby clothes to be ignored. How easy it is that we can make judgments like that. I find it very fascinating that rare is it in any church that somebody who does not have a good job ever gets put into any leadership position in the church. If they don't dress well, if they don't have a good, successful job, they're just not given any position. They're told, well, you can just do whatever we feel like gets you out of the way, but you still feel involved because we want the numbers, but we don't want you per se. And so how easy it is for that to take place. And so that is done. It's amazing how often it is that people will make judgment calls just upon whether they dress well or even just the gender. And we make prejudice statements. We say stuff like, well, it's a woman, and women who are crying are always right. There's no such, if it's a crying woman, she's absolutely right. And therefore, the guy is in the wrong. And we never stop to ask the honest question, could a crying woman not be the victim? And people say, well, that's sexist to say that. How dare you talk like that? Well, isn't it sexist to say that all women can be trusted and no men can be trusted? Isn't that sexist? Okay, so women can make things up and can lie and can cry to manipulate. I've seen it. I've seen it all the time. Just go to the Hope Center and watch those ladies cry you a boo-hoo story about their past to win your sympathies just so they can manipulate you to get what they want later. And they aren't being serious at all about the hurt or the tears. It is a very common thing. So we have to start to begin to realize we make judgments all the time. A woman comes in, she says, someone did something to me. We automatically assume she's telling the truth. A guy comes in and, we think about it. Who here has more than one kid? Or who is here with, okay, more than one kid? More than one kid, okay. How many of you here has either a brother or a sister? Or both? Okay. How many of you have ever had a fight and you tried to see who could win? And what that involved was playing on the parents to believe your story over theirs. And how easy is it for a parent to tend to side on their kids' story, one side over the other? You know, I know that when it comes there's these two youth in our church that a lot of times Joe gets believed over Hannah, but I won't say who they are. And Hannah gets unjustly punished. Yeah, she's like, true, preach it, brother. Parents are like, no. It's just interesting. We make judgment calls all the time, inappropriately based on prejudice of some nature or another. And so we can't be too quick to point our fingers at Haman. That's my point. Here's Haman. He's a bad guy. What he's doing is absolutely wrong, completely evil. Absolutely. I'm just pointing out that we might not be as different as we would appreciate. That we might have similar issues like that. Which then brings us, therefore, to principle number 6, to try to solve life's riddles. That we have to love all people, no matter how different. And that's going to be hard. How easy it is to say, hey, I saw somebody visiting. They're our kind of people. We got to make sure they come back. Another person comes in. Did they come back the next week? I don't even remember them visiting. What are you talking about? Because they weren't our kind of people. We have to learn to love all people, no matter how different they are. This means, yes, we have to love Blake Shelton fans and Rascal Flat fans. It has to happen. I know it's going to be hard, but we all got to get there. We got to get there. We got to be able to say, hey, people going to the Nickelback concert, God loves you too. We do. Okay, you got to get there. We got to love all people, no matter how different they are. Be willing to break a conversation with anyone, even if they're wearing a Hindu turban. There's a Hindu temple just like 1 mile from this building. Are we at all willing to watch where they go and to reach out to them with the love of Christ and talk to them about Jesus? Are we willing to do that? And then people might say, but I don't even know where to start. I don't know anything about Hinduism. Cool. Hit Google Wiki, start somewhere, buy a book, talk to them. They're a person. And they need Jesus. But I don't know their culture. Jesus transcends culture. Jesus does not conform to anyone's culture. He wants all of our culture to conform to him. So it doesn't matter their culture. It matters Jesus. That's what matters. And we start there. And if we don't know something about them and we're confused, ask them. They will tell you. If someone's talking to me and I mention something about Star Wars and they go, I've never seen Star Wars, and they were to ask me, what's this Star Wars? I'll be glad to tell you. For an hour. I will go to town. Okay? Anyone will tell you if you ask them. And then segue it to Jesus. It's not hard. But we got to be willing to love people enough just to reach out to them, no matter how different. If they got earrings wrapped all the way around their ear like a fishing lure, fine, invite them over to your house, take them to the neighbor's pond, grab them by the ankles, see if you get a fish, bring them over for supper and have a good time and tell them about Jesus. Just do something. Just tell them, you just got to love people. We got to love people. And I wonder if maybe that's where we're falling at. Maybe we just lost loving people. We're so mad, and the media helps us to just harness that anger. Republicans, Democrats, we're just so mad. Politics, lawyers, judges, we're just so mad. Black and white and Hispanic, we're just so mad. We've lost love. We've lost what it means to be in the image of God and image bearers. We've lost love. So we got to love people absolutely, no matter how different they are. Which brings us to the next question. Get your paddles ready. You guys took the longer route, by the way, just so you know. The other route would have been a 20-minute sermon. I'm not making that up. So congratulations. We'll be done by now. Instead, you just got the introduction. It's not that bad. So now, how we struggle like Haman and Xerxes, we've already covered on this a little bit, but there's so much more to go into this. Or how this whole story ends up pointing to Jesus. Okay? And so, I'm not telling you which one's the shorter route. So the white question, how we struggle like Haman and Xerxes, because no, I talked about Haman, but not Xerxes, or how this whole story points to Jesus. So our colors are waving, and it is a sea of red with like white caps here and there, but it is red. So we will take the Red Sea. We will move to page 6. How this whole thing points to Jesus. So, here's something very interesting that you might not have ever considered. By looking at verses 7 and 13, we find out a timeline a little bit. It tells us the months, but notice it's like here's Adar, and here's this month and that month. But notice it doesn't interpret that for us because it assumes the readers already know what this means. How this works, what the timeline is. The author is assuming the reader already knows this. Okay, assumes that we already got this all figured out and it all makes sense for us. Now, Haman's decree to kill the people of God, it's sent forth on, ends up being, ready for this, the eve of Passover. It just so happens that as Haman is casting down the lot. Now, we don't know what the lot or the pur looks like. It was something that the high priest and the temple would have inside their breastplate. And somehow the lots always, when cast, would give a yes-no situation. We don't know how that worked. We have not found on any archaeological digs some of the lot or the pur. We haven't found any. Okay, we haven't found that at all. So what we know is like a yes-no situation. Therefore, I liken it to a coin toss. Heads, it's yes. Tails, it's no. Anybody do this? Anybody willing? You guys do coin tosses? I did this one time for a college exam. It's true or false? I kid you not. And in case you're wondering, for multiple choice, all you have to do is look at the clock. And if the second hand is between 1 and 3, the answer is A. If between 3 and 6, the answer is B. C or D. If you don't know the answer, I'm like, I have no idea. B it is. Okay, so that's kind of what Haman did here. And it ends up falling in such a manner that it falls on this special time of the year for us, the special Passover. On the eve of Passover, the actual command goes out. Okay, so when you think of the Passover points to what? Egypt. Okay, so that's the timing of this. And the Passover points to Egypt. That's what it does, because that's where the Passover came from. When Israels were enslaved and the Pharaoh was having them all enslaved, was even killing some of them, and that they were like trying to be delivered. Moses was trying to get them to be delivered and kept asking Pharaoh, let my people go. Pharaoh wouldn't do it over and over again, to the point that they finally had to say, okay, God's going to come in and kill the firstborn of everybody in Egypt unless they had the blood of a lamb on the doorpost and over the top, and then the spirit of death, God's spirit, when he was going to bring death upon the land there, when it came in, was going to see that blood and then pass over that house. And so the Jews had a meal. It was a Passover meal to remember and to honor that moment that God's Spirit passed over them so they would not die. Death would not hit that house. Okay, so that's what the Passover was all about. Now, the fact that this falls onto the Passover is very, very fascinating because it points out a couple of key things. One, Haman is not the first to try to kill the Jews. This is not a new event in history. How easy it is for people to say that what we're struggling with in our culture is new. How easy it is for us to say that our problems are new. Kids say it all the time. Teenagers say it all the time. Young adults say it all the time. My parents just don't understand. But here's the interesting thing. Our problems have all been faced in the past. People say, well, Christian persecution is on a severe rise. We've never seen anything like this. I would say that to Paul. Say that to the early church. Say that to the medieval time period when they tried, before the Reformation happened, and they tried translating the Bible into a language everybody wanted to be able to read, and they were killed and cut into pieces and mailed across the lands to try to prevent them from getting a copy of the Bible. Really talk to me about how persecution is unique in America today. Talk to me how everything is the worst it's ever been. We just have lost sight on history to realize that this is nothing new. I've had people tell me, how can you have kids in this environment? Look at what the laws are doing. Look at what's happening to freedom of religion and freedom of speech. Look at what's happening. Do you really want to bring up a kid in this time period? To which I would have to say, I am really thankful that people brought up kids during World War II. I am very thankful they brought up kids during World War I. I'm very thankful they brought up kids during the Civil War. I'm very thankful they brought up kids during the persecution of the church. I'm very thankful that they didn't stop having kids because things were tough. Things have always been tough. It's not new. What we're struggling with is not unique. It's just new to us as an individual. But it's not new to society. It is not new to history. It's definitely not new to God. And so this is a great reminder that we might look at this and say, wow, Haman's doing something horrible. He's going to get away with it. Oh my goodness, how could this happen? This is unthinkable. Well, it's happened before. It happens again with the birth of Jesus Christ and Herod wanting to kill every child, every boy that was born under the age of 3. This is not anything new, and it will not continue to be anything new. It has happened before, it will happen again. And so this is a great reminder for us that the same God who was in control then is the same God who is in control now. We do not need to be people that live our lives based upon fear. We do not need to be people that spend all our time talking about conspiracy theories and how all these people are making choices out of our control and it'd be just all about fear and what are we going to do? Because all of that implies that those laws and those people are stronger and bigger than God. And it's not the case. The same God who delivered the Jews back before will be the same God who delivers the Jews this time, will be the same God who delivers his people next time. Yes, there will be death at times. Yes, there will be martyrs that exist for the faith. Always has that been the case from the get-go. All the way from the beginning of creation of humanity, where Cain killed Abel, and Abel became the first God-following martyr. And that was the first family. So it has been in existence from the beginning, and God has been in control the entire time. God will see us through no matter what happens. We need to be reminded of that. And the Passover, not only does that point to God pass over Egypt, or the Israelites in Egypt to spare the firstborn, the Passover ultimately points to Jesus, because Jesus is the ultimate Passover, because those that are bought by the blood of the Lamb will have the death sentence passed over them. Any Christian who is bought by the blood of Christ experiences a Passover, experiences the ultimate Passover, because the Passover ultimately pointed to Jesus. And just think of the parallels that are here. It's really fascinating, the parallels that are on this. Think of it like this. You look at King Xerxes, and you look at like Mordecai working with his cousin Esther, and you got like Jesus working with his cousin John the Baptist, and you got all these similarities that kind of work their way on down. It's very fascinating. You look at Xerxes where he's like, I'm the king of kings, and my throne is the throne of thrones, and what I say is written in stone. Then you got Jesus, who is the king of kings, and he sits on the real throne of thrones, and what he wrote literally was carved, the Ten Commandments, into stone. Okay, and so you got some amazing parallels that are taking place, but ultimately what you got is Xerxes was ultimately a failed king, but Jesus is a good king. And we can be able to look at Jesus as being the ultimate king that we need. And I'll be honest with you, America needs a king. I know we have a president, but we need a king. I'm not talking about like the Queen of England king. I'm not talking about like a royal figure, and let's all go to the royalty. I'm talking we need the King of Kings. That's what we need. Someone who is a good ruler. Someone who's not a corrupt ruler. Someone who brings about true justice. Someone who brings about righteous laws. Someone who brings about true healing, true restoration. Someone who brings about ultimate prosperity of the land. Someone that is Jesus. That's what we absolutely need. We need someone exactly like Jesus. But we don't just need him. Everybody needs him. And how dare us ever choose the right to remain silent when it comes to Jesus? There was a song written many years ago, and I really like it. It's by Philip Tragendine, and it says, "You don't have the right to remain silent if you've been arrested by God's grace." And I love that. Because everyone needs Jesus. But they won't hear if we don't love all people. They won't hear unless we share this Jesus with everyone. Earthly rulers, check this out. Earthly rulers, you want to know how they want to treat treason? You want to know how they want to treat evil and sin? They want to treat it with death. And the Bible says that's okay to do, and that's proper so. You know how Jesus, however, treats treason? You know how he treats sin and evil? He hung on a cross and he said, Father, forgive them. That's what Jesus did. So when you look at someone and you see them and you say, man, that person is sick. Man, that person is messed up. Man, that person, what's wrong with them? Look how they did their hair. Look at their face. Look at their clothes. Look at their behavior. Man, they smell. They reek. It's like they vomited in their own urine on themselves. What they just are horrible. And we look at them and we say, how disgusting. How terrible. You know what we need to do? We need to look at them and say, Jesus died for them, and they're missing it. Jesus wants to help reach into their life with grace and mercy and understanding and restore them and heal them and watch them become a new creation. That's what Jesus wants for them. So it would be very helpful for us not to be like Haman in that regard, but to be like Jesus and say, Father, may your forgiveness extend to them. And maybe that means we're the instrument of that message. The question is, are we willing to go there? Are we willing to really love all people no matter how different? And I know it's real easy to say, yeah, Pastor, I do that already. I can give you 100 stories. In fact, some of you probably come up to me and tell me 100 stories. And then this evening, we're going to find out that it's harder than we ever thought. Then suddenly tomorrow comes, and we go to work, and our boss shows up, and we go, man, why can't they call in sick? I know so many people say, why can't California just defect and become their own country? Man, they make so many crazy ideas. They're outlawing straws, which they did. I don't know if you knew about this. It's crazy. Crazy stuff happens in the coastlines, and I get that. Crazy laws. People with crazy ideas and talking about their surfer dude boards, and I get that. People on the East Coast love avocados. Like, what's wrong with people? And I get that. But and people say, well, look at the media. Look at Hollywood. Look at all the stuff they're doing. Look how twisted it is. Look how disgusting it is. Look how corrupt everything is. Let me ask you something. What would happen if all those people got saved? Instead of saying how bad they are, what if they were given the gospel? What if they were loved enough with Jesus Then they used all that media influence and all that Hollywood access and all that whatever and all their pull and all their voting power and everything else. What if they were to do that for Jesus? What would change in our country? So before you point your finger at a politician or a lawyer or any surfer dude walking the street or a yuppie with an avocado, before you start saying, look at the snowflakes, talk about Jesus. Because man, that would make a difference. Let's talk about loving people rather than just hating people. Let's talk about reaching Jesus to people rather than just being angry at people. Let's have a word of prayer.